Hi, I'm Wendy Kieswetter, and I'm going to be presenting on Gustav Klimt. So here we go. Um, he was born in Baumgarten near Vienna, and his father was a poor engraver. Despite this, he still followed in his father's footsteps and became an engraver himself. And then he attended art school, where he started getting commissions for the portraits he would make, and then this eventually made him pretty famous, and he made a name for himself. This led him to become a pretty popular artist in the Belle Epoque period, which was a time with a great wealth of creativity. And Klimt used his creativity to paint a lot of women, especially a lot of naked women. So we'll be seeing that. During this time, eroticism was in the air. This was the time of Sigmund Freud's, like the peak of his popularity. So that's sort of the backdrop of this. And a lot of Klimt's work is very ornate and gilded and filled with light. And so our first piece is Death and Life. And here we can see life. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. If you can, I'm hovering over it. Life is shown in this like circle, this oval thing. It's depicted with like bright colors and pastels. And this is in direct contrast to the darkness of this Reaper, aka Death. And the age range in the circle oval of life shows that everyone's included in life, everyone's beautiful and vibrant and alive. There's like a baby to an old person, everyone's included, and that's great, but it also shows that no one is safe from death. Death is watching us all. And despite this grim theme, everyone in this piece has a calm expression. There's a sort of blissful ignorance about them. They're too busy taking in the beauty of the life that they're so absorbed in that they don't see death calmly watching them from the side. However, maybe blissful ignorance isn't the best term because we see, again, hopefully you can see my mouse, you can see in this figure on the top left, she's the only one with her eyes open and she's looking at death and sort of mimicking his pose. She's like tilting her head and stuff like that. And she's observing death. So it shows that these people are embracing themselves, but they're also embracing their fate. They know that death will come one day, but they're just enjoying life while they have it. And this next piece is called The Kiss. It's one of Klimt's most popular works. And it not only displays an example of passion and intimacy, but also the power behind that theme. And this is reflected in the bright colors, this like, bright gilded robe that swathes the two people in it and makes them become one. In fact, the only real parts of their body that are shown are their hands and face, which are the parts that are performing the kiss, the intimate act. And there's also this golden Byzantine background. And for the people who have not taken another art history class before, that sort of just means that it signifies a theme of timelessness. So like intimacy was important and impactful like then, now, always. It can't be placed with a certain time because it's always important. And so this next one is called Auditorium in the Old Burg Theater, weird name, and a weird painting because it's a lot different from the ones we've seen before. It's a lot more naturalistic, which shows that Klimt can paint naturalistically. He just chooses not to, much like the other artists that we've studied in this course. And that's not the only sort of off thing about it. This is a theater, and the most interesting part of the theater is the stage. So you'd expect this whole thing just to be flipped, but instead our expectations are flipped when the audience is painted instead of the stage. And it sort of makes the audience seem like actors in a way, and I guess why not? They're all like decked out in their fancy costumes, aka their like dresses and tuxedos and stuff. And so this painting basically highlights, like the beauty of the theater that Klimt was commissioned to paint, but also it shows that like the lives of these rich, entertaining, and important high-class people who frequented this theater often can be a show upon themselves because of just how interesting they are. And this piece is Tragedy. This is a Klimt staple. A lot of his pieces have a woman as the protagonist, as the main person in the painting, and she's centered with her eyes looking at the viewer. And so this is just an example of that. And Klimt was supposed to be creating a look of antiquity when he made this. But a lot of people, when they see this piece, they just said like, okay, this just looks like a modern woman from Vienna, but he just couldn't resist painting a modern woman. Um, Besides that, this is a pretty dark piece. It's called Tragedy After All, and there's that scary mask, and she has a dark robe on. However, by adding like pieces of jewelry, like the hoop earrings and the little bracelet on her wrist, he adds to this woman's femininity. Speaking of femininity, this is Judith and the head of Holofernes. Um, this is another example of a woman centered looking at the viewer. And so this is the story of the biblical story of Judith, who seduced and decapitated General Holofernes because she wanted to stop her city from being destroyed by an army. And here in the bottom right, we can see Holofernes' head. And I think it's just funny how he's decapitated clearly, but also the composition is so focused on Judith that he gets decapitated again vertically. I just think it's funny how it adds insult to injury. And Judith herself is decapitated in a strange way. This gold ornate necklace just like slices her head from her torso, and it really makes you focus on her seductive expression. And at the time, the people of Vienna were they flipped out. They couldn't handle this femme fatale version of Judith, because the original version, she is like a pious woman, and they just didn't like this one. This is water serpents, and it's beautiful women floating. There are lesbian connotations to this painting because like it's naked women very close to each other, just like floating around. And it would not have been accepted if Klimt just titled it like women swimming together. It would not have been accepted. So by adding a more metaphorical or allegorical title, as well as these like weird swirling patterns, it became more acceptable, and he could show it without fear of censorship, which in a way is sort of like his take on a Venus, I like to think. This one's a bit different. It is called The Tree of Life, and it's a quick departure from women, but in many philosophies and theologies, the Tree of Life signifies a connection between heaven, the earth, and the underworld. So the twisting branches reach up to the heavens, the roots go into the earth, and then your eye is drawn towards the center of the composition to this black bird, which symbolizes the underworld. And so this painting just shows that everything that has a beginning also has an end. Things are born, they grow, and then they die and go back into the earth. So we're back at the ladies now. So this was a commissioned portrait of a rich industrialist's wife, a portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer, that was her name. However, she was also one of Klimt's mistresses, which is interesting. Just like with Judith, there's a strange mix of naturalism and also this like strange ornate gold gilded pattern. And just like Judith, again, it like slices her hands and slices below her collarbone, and it really just makes you focus that much harder on her flesh. And speaking of flesh, there is Danae, and this shows a woman being seduced by the god Jupiter. And this golden rain, the markings here symbolize Jupiter. And so this woman with her parted lips, her closed eyes, her flushed cheeks, and even the fact that her hair is red, that all adds to the sensuality of this piece. And in this one, Klimt, he's covered people's bodies with like gold, but in this one he's saying like, nope, this girl's being seduced, I'm going to show her being seduced. And this last piece is called The Three Ages of Women, and it's a bit more deep and a bit more real, whatever, it's deeper and more sad. But here we see on the right an infant being held by like a young, beautiful woman, and they're each comforting each other, and they're surrounded by these calm, trusting, swirling blue patterns. And then there's this old woman on the left, and she's not comforted by any other figure or any other pattern swirling around to conceal her. She's just bare. She cannot hide, and the best she can do is just cover her face in shame. And so this piece shows a woman at every stage of life, like infant, young woman, and then old. And interestingly enough, this old woman is inspired by a Rodin. I hope I'm saying that correctly. A Rodin, yeah, sculpture. And it's called something terrible, like the old crone or something like that. And it's of this woman who was the most beautiful in town, and then she inevitably became old. And so she's just like old and decrepit, and her self-worth is basically gone because she's no longer beautiful. And so this piece is poetic and sad because it speaks to the inevitability of aging and then like death and just being old, which sucks. Um, but it also shows that, like, especially for women and especially for women during this time, your beauty is, well, excuse me, your worth is based on your beauty, and that's pretty sad. But in all, it's clear that Klimt was a skilled artist who, he loved to paint naked women, but not all of them were beautiful, and not all of them were just to look at and gawk at. He actually covered a lot of different deep topics from death and life and everything in between. So I hope you enjoyed learning about him. I certainly did. And that's all. Thanks. Here are my sources.